بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الرحمن علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان الشمس والقمر بحسبان والنجم والشجر يسجدان والسماء رفعها ووضع الميزان ألا تطغوا في الميزان صدق الله العظيم.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon. I am Akash Shah Mohammed, Research Officer at Strategic Vision Institute, Islamabad. On behalf of Strategic Vision Institute, I welcome you all on the Day 2 of SVI International Conference on Pakistan-Russia Relations amid Transforming Global Order. The conference is organized by Strategic Vision Institute, Islamabad in collaboration with Gorchakov Fund and Center for Energy and Security Studies, Russia. Before beginning today's working session, there are a few announcements that I want to make. Audience are requested to please switch off their phones or put them on the silent mode. Our session will be live streamed on Zoom video conferencing. For those who are attending via Zoom, kindly note that default mics of all the attendees will be on mute. Online participants are requested to kindly use the Q&A option to type out their questions. Please do include your name as well as your organizational affiliation along with your questions. While we highly encourage you to participate, we request you to please be brief in your questions. We shall try our best to ensure that all questions get answered within the stipulated time. Let's commence our last session titled Reducing Nuclear Risks at the Time of Conflict Escalation. The contemporary era of escalating conflicts hint at a potential exploration of strategies and mechanisms aimed at minimizing nuclear dangers in the face of heightened tensions. The aim of this session is to delve into the geopolitical dynamics, diplomatic initiatives, and risk mitigation efforts between Pakistan and Russia within the broader framework of the evolving global order. Let me introduce you our worthy moderator and speakers for this session. The session will be moderated by Dr. Nasir Hafeez. Dr. Nasir Hafeez is Director Research at Strategic Vision Institute. He holds a PhD from Department of International Relations, National Defense University, Islamabad. Our first guest speaker for this session will be Dr. Naeem Salik. Dr. Naeem Salik is currently Executive Director at Strategic Vision Institute, Islamabad. He has previously served as Director of Arms Control and Disarmament Affairs at the Strategic Plans Division. His publications include 4 books and over 40 research papers. Our second guest speaker for this session would be Dr. Elena Chernenko. Dr. Elena Chernenko is Special Correspondent of Commerce newspaper and the member of the Board of Council of Foreign and Defense Relations in the PIR Center. She holds a PhD in history from Lomonosov Moscow State University. Our third speaker for this session is Dr. Petr Topychkanov. Dr. Petr Topychkanov is Senior Research Assistant at Institute of Asian and African Studies, Moscow State University, and an Associate Senior Researcher in the SIPRI Weapons of Mass Destruction Program. He holds the position of Senior Researcher at the Center for International Security at the Primakov National Research Institute of World Economy and International Relations of the Russian Academy of Sciences. He is also an Assistant Professor at the School of World Politics at the Lomonosov Moscow State University. Now, I would hand over the floor to the moderator of this session, Dr. Nasir Hafeez. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Akash. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my profound pleasure that I am moderating this session of very eminent scholars, especially my teacher, Dr. Salik, is also on the panel. And in the audience, I also recognize a lot of other my teachers, Dr. Adil, Dr. Zafar, Dr. Mujadid. So in the company of my teachers, while sitting on the stage, I am very confident wherever I'll be struck up, I'll be referring to them. Moreover, whatever good I am going to deliver is because of their contribution, and whatever bad or mistakes I'm going to commit, those are of my own. I think it would be very pertinent to highlight that nuclear weapons, ever since their inception, have played an important role in maintaining the strategic stability around international globe, and the longest period of peace which has been ensured that there has been no war between major powers. Similar has been the experience in South Asia, that after the May 1998 nuclear tests and then nuclearization of South Asia, we have not seen any major wars between India and Pakistan. Why I want to emphasize that this thing, because in the age of nuclear pessimism, where nuclear abolished, they are trying to say that there has to be a requirement of a treaty to abolish nuclear weapons. Simultaneously, we need to recognize that nuclear weapons have a positive role at the international level and at the regional level. We do desire and wish that there should be a complete universal disarmament, including the nuclear disarmament. But despite our best effort, that is not possible at the moment, and not even in the foreseeable future, as has been understood. So before I ask my panel or those speakers, experts here, I would like to highlight three important points just to set the stage for our discussion. Actually, if you want to keep the nuclear weapon safe, the best and the safest nuclear weapon is the weapon which is not existing, or at least it is demated from its delivery means, and if it is disassembled and kept separately in different compartments, geographically, physically located apart from each other. And this is the safest nuclear weapon. But then there is a problem that if you want to use the nuclear weapons in the time of crisis, if whatever the level of escalation is, whenever there is a time to use the nuclear weapons, then you will not be able to use them at the appropriate time. So there's a dilemma of the operational readiness versus the security. So you bargain between both the concepts, how much ready the nuclear arsenal has to be to ensure that the deterrence remains at the level of its required level, and when the enemy is deterred, that if there is a requirement to use it, it will be used. So that is the fail-safe management, that it should be used once it is required, and at the same time it should not be used once it is not required. So this is the dilemma of bargain which goes on between the safety and security of the nuclear weapons, and at the same time the operational readiness of the nuclear weapons. Then the question of the responsible nuclear behavior. I think what we share with the Russia, the erstwhile Soviet Union, and Pakistan is that both the states have been, Soviet Union during the Cold War was the target of the American nuclear discourse, where they were being asked that they were being painted as black. Similarly, Pakistan also, after 1998 test, and even before that, was the target of a lot of criticism emanating from the questioning the nuclear safety and security. So, but what happened in the process, Pakistan has evolved and developed such a prudent and efficient, stringent security regime. Yesterday, I think I am reminded of one of the proposition that if today we would like to look around the world, the nuclear weapon states, so the most credible nuclear deterrence at the moment is of North Korea. So if given that argument, and I'm sure there are reasons for that, and there are informations available on that, but today if I would like to rank the most secure and the safest nuclear weapon on the globe, it is basically the Pakistani nuclear weapons program. And I'm not saying it at my own, it is recognized by the International Atomic Energy Commission themselves. The National Security, Nuclear Security Action Plan And quite recently in 2020, we have the nuclear security regime, which has been given out by the Foreign Office. It is evident that a very stringent mechanism is in place, and if anywhere on the globe, if anything can be secure, it can be claimed that the Pakistani nuclear weapons and nuclear program is secure. So, given this slight introduction of the risks, so just I would like to flash one slide that covers the entire range of the problems. There has been a recent report of 2019 on nuclear risk reduction, a framework of analysis by United Nations Institute of Disarmament. They have highlighted that there are possibly 4 scenarios where the nuclear weapons could be used. One is the doctrinal use, where the doctrine itself outlines this is the authorized use at the highest level of the spectrum. Then it is the escalatory use, and then unauthorized and accidental use. So these are the probable or possible nuclear weapon use scenarios. So this framework gives and discusses the entire spectrum of threat as well as the vulnerabilities. So I'm sure in the process of our discussion, we would be touching upon all these nuclear risks which emanate from different dimensions of these scenarios. So let me now start off my request my worthy panelists to elaborate. The first question
is bring nuclear weapons in the center of the current international affairs. And that is why now we have these risks. But I would say that unfortunately, it's not just about the technologies. We can deal with the technologies. The expertise already is high. But it's about that political development in different regions, including in Europe, in your region as well. It creates more difficult situation and more dangerous. Thank you.
Excellent. I think Petr has been on dot once he was appreciating the strategic sense of Pakistani audiences. I'm happy that he has highlighted right at the beginning. But I think this will not save you from the question answers. I think there will be a lot of questions at the end. I think the question of nuclear sharing, which you were talking about, this further burdens the credibility of nuclear deterrence, and then drags the nuclear weapon states or the nuclear armed states into the conflicts in other regions. And I think it's very important that the kind of sharing which the NATO is having, and it's going to have an impact especially in Europe. So I'm very happy that you covered that. And of course, the element of technology, the artificial intelligence, and another area of expertise of Elena, I would then ask her to explain the role of the cyber warfare in paralyzing the command and control structures, and then challenging. These are the non-nuclear methods to entangle the nuclear deterrence at the lower level. But before we get into the technicalities, now I would request my teacher, Dr. Salik, that please, sir, if you can give us the overview of the nuclear risks overall at the international level, and then at the national level or the regional level. And of course, I would certainly expect that at this audience and then at this forum, we would, if you would slightly educate us on the nuclear security regime which has been enforced in Pakistan. So over to you, sir.
Thank you, Nasir. I think the groundwork has been laid by my 2 Russian colleagues before me. But what I want to bring to your notice is that unlike the Cold War days, once the nuclear equation was rather simple, with 2 parties confronting each other, NATO led by United States and Warsaw Pact countries led by the Soviet Union. And there were 2 power centers, basically 2 decision-making nodes, US on the one side and Soviet Union on the other. The situation is far more complicated at present because of the emergence of regional nuclear players in the form of India, Pakistan, and North Korea. This has resulted into multiple decision-making centers and also complicated the equation. There is no direct deterrence equation between 2 parties or 2 states. It is now in the form of, you can understand it in the form of various triangles. One is at the top, the global triangle, which involves America on one side and its confrontation with Russia on the one hand and with China on the other. Then there is another triangle which covers South Asia, in which China and India, that is one dyad, and India, Pakistan is the other dyad. Now this triangle does not end here. One node of the triangle, China itself, is also linked, one with the global triangle, and on the other side, it is also a player in the DPRK US nuclear confrontation. Because of the geography and proximity of China to DPRK, it will be very difficult for China to stay away from any nuclear confrontation between DPRK and US. So what happens is that because of these, and then the last triangle is in Europe, where Russia is confronting Europe on the one hand and US on the other, and then US and Europe, they are complementing each other. The result is that because of the interconnectivity of all these triangles, whatever happens, even in a regional context or at the global level, this chain of events will transfer through these triangular relationships and the linkages from one end to the other. So the whole system can be destabilized. So that's the biggest problem what we are facing now. And that is the reason that countries which have got very strong American nuclear guarantees, countries like Japan and South Korea, they were feeling uneasy, and there was internal debate both in Japan and in South Korea about the need to have their own nuclear capabilities. Although the Americans have tried to pacify them, particularly South Korea, through that Washington Declaration, which was issued at the time of the visit of South Korean president to America. They have also agreed to involve South Korea in the nuclear decision making and planning, and also to hold regular tabletop exercises to involve the Korean officials into this dialogue. They also promised to send their nuclear submarines frequently to the Korean ports to reassure the Koreans. But still, maybe momentarily they have alleviated their concerns and fears, but the undercurrents of this unease is still there in the Korean society. Similarly, there were some voices in Germany after the conflict between Russia and Ukraine started. There were some voices suggesting in Germany that the way the European situation, the security situation and environment is changing, maybe there is a need for Germany to consider having its own nuclear capability. I think that is the very far off idea, but there is much more possibility of this kind of thing happening in the Asia Pacific in the form of South Koreans, Japan, maybe Taiwan one day. And Australia, we know that after the AUKUS agreement, that is also a deviation from the tradition that here are two nuclear states which are sharing high-end nuclear technology, which involves weapon-grade materials to one of their allies, that is Australia, by promising to give them 8 nuclear-powered submarines. Not realizing that in their eagerness to contain China in this region, they are introducing new threats, because the nuclear-powered submarines with Australia will not only be seen as threat by China, but also by the countries in the immediate neighborhood of Australia, that is the Southeast Asian countries, the ASEAN countries. And then because of the long reach of the nuclear powered submarines, they will pose a threat to countries as far as Pakistan. Because if the Australian submarines start patrolling the Indian Ocean to checkmate the Chinese submarines there, it will pose a direct threat to the Pakistani security as well. So that is one area. The second, there was mention of dual-use technologies. Now, dual-use technologies create confusion, but more than that is the advanced convention technologies, what we call non-nuclear strategic weapons. These are non-nuclear weapons, but they have strategic effect, like various kinds of conventionally armed hypersonic missiles, and there are several other varieties of the weapon. We also know the threat which cyber can pose to nuclear command and control and safety and security of nuclear installations. AI, we know if it is not regulated properly and it is involved in command and control and decision making without thorough consideration of its downsides, that might also become a problem in future. Then is the problem of entanglement. In many countries, there are a lot of naval bases, there are a lot of air bases which co-host both nuclear and non-nuclear weapon system, delivery systems particularly. And in case there is a conventional war and conventional weapons are aimed at those installations, whether it is a port or it is an air base, they could inadvertently strike at some of the elements of the nuclear strategic forces. Now, how will it be taken? Will it be taken as a first strike, disarming first strike, or what? In terms of reaction and in terms of its effects for the recipient country, it will be the same effect, and obviously they will react accordingly. So this entanglement, whether intended or unintended, is another big problem. So my view is that nuclear escalation or nuclear use will very rarely happen deliberately, and somebody may plan it, but mostly the danger is of inadvertent escalation. So as I always say, that the best way to prevent a nuclear war is to prevent any war at all. Because if the conflict starts, then the escalation is built into it. If the conflict is prevented, obviously the escalation will be also out of the equation. Now the last part about the safety and security regime in Pakistan. As you all know, up to 1998, Pakistani nuclear program was covert, and as such there was no public debate on issues like nuclear doctrine, safety, security, and command and control and other related issues. It was only after the overt nuclearization and demonstration of nuclear capability in May 1998 following the Indian tests that Pakistan started working on these issues seriously, about command and control, about safety, security, and safety and security was given very high priority. While the work had started on it, within a very short time, 9/11 happened, which transformed the security environment in a big way, because we were having a war in our backyard in Afghanistan and its likely spillover effects. So Pakistan then had to accelerate its efforts to enhance its safety and security. With the result that initially, once we started after 1998, we had just a few hundred men, mostly retired military personnel, and one officer of the rank of one-star general in each of the major strategic facilities. And it was a very, very limited scope. They were just trying to keep a pulse of what is happening inside those organizations. But they were not reporting to anybody outside there, they were reporting to their respective bosses. It was soon realized that this system is not sufficient. At the SPD level, there was one brigadier who was called the Advisor Security NCA. So he had people in the organizations and getting reports from there, but it was very minimal arrangement. But as I said, after 9/11, this urgency and greater investment into this, and Pakistan started raising what we call the security force, nuclear security force, which is a dedicated force, recruited, trained, and equipped specifically to provide security to static installations as well as any nuclear materials moving anywhere in Pakistan. So to begin with, it was at 10,000, and then they crossed 20,000 as the threats multiplied, and later on it went up to somewhere between 25,000 to 30,000. They have an air component which can airlift the quick reaction force to any location within Pakistan within half an hour and meet any situation if it arises anywhere. It has a maritime element, it has counterintelligence teams, and then there is a layered defense at all the nuclear installations, starting from the perimeter, the sensors like microwave and infrared and others, then the fencing, and along with that the manpower manning those towers and those fences. On the other hand, we also established in 2000 the Pakistan Nuclear Regulatory Authority, which has a specific responsibility to ensure safety and security of the peaceful side of Pakistan's nuclear program, which includes all research institutions which are under IAEA safeguards, as well as all the nuclear power plants. So that is the domain of the Pakistan Nuclear Regulatory Authority. They set very high standards, and the SOPs and those were dished out to all those installations. And similar arrangements were then made. As I said, the security force came up, and then the security division headed by a two-star general with all this manpower and rapid reaction force. There is a nuclear emergency center at the security division which works round the clock 24 hours, and it is in communication with all the stakeholders as well as all the facilities, and it can immediately react to any situation which happens. Then in 2005, we introduced what we call the National Nuclear Security Action Plan. It was originally a 5-year plan, but it has been extended since then. This was a plan to deal with any nuclear or radiation-related emergency anywhere in Pakistan. And the main responsibility for this was given to the PNRA. They established a emergency center, which works round the clock. And they have emergency teams of technical experts who can be flown to any location to deal with the emergency. But till the time they reach there, there are regional directorates of PNRA, so they immediately reach the spot. And all the first responders like the police and local law enforcement agencies, they have also been given clear-cut responsibilities through the local administration, that in case of any emergency, this is what you have to do, because the first task is to prevent the panic among the public and cordon off that area so that people do not enter there until the emergency teams come and deal with that. So these were some of the aspects which I thought that were critical parts of Pakistan's nuclear safety security regime. And if there is anything else you want to ask, I am ready to discuss that in the question answer session.
Thank you, sir. I think once Dr. Salik is on the stage and he has the mic, then you can expect that all the information would be available to you, and I think we will benefit from his the experience, the expanse of experience and engagement and working in this field during the question answer session. But I really appreciate, and one point which he highlighted, and it is the focus of the entire Pakistani policy, that if you want to avoid nuclear war, the important thing is that there should be no war. So if you can stop the war, and then there is a possibility that you can control the escalation. But if you allow the war to happen and to start and even simmer at a level, then you cannot control the escalation. I think there is a very important aspect related to the non-proliferation and arms control, which Elena has been discussing quite recently in arms control today. So I would request, Elena, would you like to say something about the de-ratification which the Russians have recently, this step they have taken? What were the reasons and why, and do you think that this has substantially impacted upon the overall effort which was being done?
Thank you very much, Dr. Hafeez. This made quite a lot of news all around the world, the Russian de-ratification of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. Now, I would say that this is rather a symbolic gesture than a practical step. It does have practical implications, but it's quite symbolic at first place. It shows that Russia is dissatisfied with the current status quo, with the situation in its confrontation with the West altogether, but also with the situation with the US concretely when it comes to this treaty, because as you know, it has been opened up for assignment in '96. Russia has signed and ratified the treaty quite soon after that in 2000, whereas the US have signed the treaty. They have promised to ratify it, but really made only one special serious attempt to do that failed. And basically for the last 23 years, there is no serious attempts at trying to ratify the treaty. Now, what the Russian government was saying and the Russian officials, the Russian experts were saying that this is not normal because it is very important for Russia to be in a security balance on par with the US, especially when it comes to the nuclear sphere. So here, there is a situation where Russia has done its part and the US is not even attempting to do that. And people in the Russian government and in the Russian expert circles were asking themselves, if the US is not seeing any benefits for itself to ratify the treaty and even sees this balance, negative sides from ratifying the treaty, why should Russia wait forever for them to do that? So that's one of the part of the ideas, is this balance and the fact that the US are not even trying to go towards ratification. And under the Trump administration, they actually made it their official policy that they would not ratify the treaty. Under the Biden administration, this was reconsidered, but still we see no practical movement there. So that's one part. The other part is the general difficult confrontational situation between Russia and the West currently that calls for some action, as some people in the Russian government and the expert circles think, something that has to show the Russian dissatisfaction with the current status quo. And there is many things that has been discussed actually. And the Russian President Vladimir Putin, he has mentioned some of them during his speech at the Valdai Club when he was questioned by Fyodor Lukyanov. One of the things that he has mentioned is that Russian experts, especially technical experts, they say that maybe we should resume nuclear testing because there is a technical need for them. So the president was kind of very on that. He didn't say categorically no or yes, but he didn't support it or deny it. Another question that he was asked by another prominent Russian expert, Sergei Karaganov, there at the Valdai Forum, is that maybe Russia should change its nuclear doctrine, make it more sharp, make the nuclear threshold lower, because right now there is a very, very limited set of scenarios under which Russia, according to its nuclear doctrine, can use nuclear weapons. So there is the idea that maybe we should change that to show resolve and the readiness that Russia has in this sphere. And the third option was de-ratifying the CTBT. So out of these options, if you take only these, having a nuclear test, changing the nuclear doctrine, lowering the nuclear threshold, and de-ratifying the CTBT, you can see that this is maybe the lightweight option. It's the most symbolic out of all, with the least practical implications, because it is important to understand that Russia is staying in the treaty, the signature is still there, it is cooperating with the preparatory committee of the CTBTO, so it's showing dissatisfaction. And now actually the last thing I'm saying on this, in the latest speech, the secretary of the preparatory committee of the organization of the CTBT, Dr. Robert Floyd, is calling now the three states to do a step together, joint step, Russia, China, and the US, to try to ratify it together. And he is sure that the others will follow, which would then also be for Pakistan as well.
So I think now I think most of the people here in this. Can I have the records? So now we are quite clear that listening from a Russian friend, that what actually went on and what were the options at the table. Fortunately, I think the vegetarian option was adopted at the end of the day, that they just only resorted to de-ratify. But I think there are some trends in our region also where the Indians are feeling dissatisfied with their current state of nuclear tests, and they are preparing some ground to conduct another round of nuclear tests, probably the thermonuclear weapons. So now I think we are left with very little time, so I would request my two other panelists to kindly be brief, but of course we will not leave these important questions unaddressed before we open up the House. So Dr. Salik, would you please, first just throw some light on the Indian ambition of nuclear testing, and in case if they resume testing, so what options Pakistan do have?
What has happened is that there is a consensus now in India that India's claimed thermonuclear test in 1998 was a fizzle. It didn't work. And there are quite a few people in India, like people like Bharat Karnad and some of the scientists, they have been advocating for quite some time that India has to retest its thermonuclear designs so that it is credible. But obviously it is not easy to do that. However, for last couple of years now, they are preparing ground for it. Ashley Tellis, first of all, took up this issue, trying to argue in his latest book that if India has to really checkmate China and compete with it, it must have a credible thermonuclear capability, which requires testing. And then his latest article in Foreign Affairs, where he was trying to tell the Americans in a very oblique manner that if India starts testing, first of all, he argued that India is not there yet to compete with China because they don't have thermonuclear capability. And then he argues that if India starts testing tomorrow, America should look the other way. They should not bother about it. They should not be perturbed because it is in their long-term interest, because that will make India more capable to challenge China. And then Bharat Karnad wrote in one of the Indian publications and in some of his blogs where he is very strongly advocating the resumption of nuclear testing, particularly the thermonuclear tests. But if it starts happening, as there was some Russian criticism of the Americans that they are probably planning to restart nuclear testing, and they have already carried out some hydrodynamic and subcritical tests, and by signaling their intent by de-ratifying CTBT, obviously they are not immediately going to test, but they have opened their options to respond to any such action by the United States or any other country. Now, as I mentioned in my earlier remarks, all these developments around the world are linked up. And if the nuclear testing starts now in any corner, it will open up the gates for all the countries, particularly the newer entrants into the nuclear race, which have carried out a very small number of nuclear tests compared with the hundreds and thousands of tests of the Americans, the Russians, and all other major nuclear powers. So that is the problem. But remember that the international norm against testing still holds, and as per the Vienna law, the Vienna Convention, the law of treaties, it is very clear that even if you have signed a treaty, you are bound not to do anything which is contrary to the objectives of that treaty. So just because of that obligation, I don't think so any country will find it easy to start testing. And my last comment is about the refusal by the US Senate to ratify the CTBT. I don't think so there will be any situation in the foreseeable future where this thing can happen. Why? Because if you look at the power balance in the US Senate, it is usually 51-49 or 52-48, whereas for ratification is required 2/3 majority, which is very difficult to achieve. And the history tells us that if US Senate has refused to ratify a treaty once, they have never gone back on their decision. So from my point of view, CTBT is a dead horse, so we can keep discussing it, and people who are working in CTBT and others, for them, it is their employment, but effectively, it is no good now.
So I think this is a very strong note, especially for those people who are working to push forward, I think, the efforts to get the CTBT ratified. But anyway, I think we are already running short of time. I would request, Petr, if you have any concluding remarks or summing up anything which has been left out on nuclear risks and the current evolving situation or the future landscape where something has to be done in this direction, so you can, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. We will cover some other issues during the discussion, but I want to say that, so the picture is gloomy, but still there are options to have a more stable future. And at least there are 3 ways to help nuclear stability and to avoid nuclear risks. So the first, and all these options are related to enhancing verifications, related to nuclear arms control, disarmament in the sense of the UN documents. The first goal is to enhance existing capabilities of the International Atomic Energy Agency and CTBTO, not only to help them to have stable budgets and capabilities and workforce, but also to help them in coordinating their own efforts between themselves, and also to help them in different regions. The second goal is revive, prolong, and expand temporary and specific verification measures whenever possible beyond the late treaties. It can be unilateral, declarations, certifications, it can be bilateral, multilateral. By the way, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization provides a good platform for a dialogue on strategic stability between member states, including those who have not very good relations. I can give you one example. China and Russia some years ago signed a document, a statement of global strategic stability. It's like a picture we have about different issues we discussed today, how they are connected, and how we have vision about them. And my final goal about enhancing the situation is about adding new actors and tools related to emerging technologies to existing verification mechanisms. Non-state actors in cooperation with international organizations and states may help respond to the challenges of increasing the volume of information and data and the number of types of sources related to nuclear capabilities. So they should be engaged more actively, and we should find solutions how to organize this help legally, that it's not just some exercises related to open sources work, but it's something like more institutionalized and effective. Thank you.
I think there is light at the end of the tunnel. So what you are giving us a optimistic view that if we have the enhanced capability, the verification mechanism, some technological tools built in where we have the capacity of international organizations to conduct the verification of different arsenals or agreements, so then there is a possibility that we can look forward to more arms control, and then even, for example, we can go towards the global disarmament also. And then you also highlighted about the legal options. Yes, of course, the United Nations is quite, I think, dysfunctional, and we all agree on that. But still, despite being dysfunctional and not being able to resolve major issues, the framework of international law provides a lot of advantages to weak nations, at least to put up their case. So let's not give up hope onto the international organizations. At least there is a framework existing where we can have at least a discussion going on. So with this, I think the topic of today was so, I think, exhaustive that even if we would have carried out the discussion for another 2-3 hours, we will not be able to complete that. But given the restriction of time, now I open the house for the discussion, question and answers. Let me, before asking you to ask the question or allowing you to ask the question, we are here to discuss only a very limited portion of our agenda. So I would request to kindly keep the debate within the agenda of this topic. I know you may have a lot of questions to be asked from our Russian friends who are sitting on the podium, but I think this is not the time. We will have at the end of this session tea break session where you can have your other questions. So please restrict yourselves to the questions relevant to this agenda. So Raza, you can have.
Raza Khan, Special Correspondent, PTU World. Excellent effort on the part of SVI. This was badly needed, Pakistan-Russia conference. Dr. Elena and Dr. Petr, I would like you to address this issue. India has been made a lapdog of the, West is hell-bent on using it as a lapdog against China, and it has made it a so-called net security provider in the Indian Ocean region. What is the Russian perspective on this? If India has decided to go into the lap of the West, what would the Russians think about that? And my second question is to Brigadier Salik. Sir, in trying to be to lay too much emphasis on security and sanctity of our nuclear assets, we have dispersed them. It's open source knowledge. It's not a secret. India, through BrahMos, with a speed of 3,700 kilometers per hour, and there was a BrahMos fired against us, and it hit Pakistan, and they claim to be a misfire by them. Will we have enough time to mate our warheads and fire against India in case it does carry out a first strike against us? And it already has a nuclear submarine, and it carried out a nuclear deterrence patrol. Your thoughts, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Raza. We will group 2-3 questions together, and then we can, I think, Dr. Adil.
Yeah, thank you. Adil Sultan, I'm heading one of the departments of strategic studies at the Air University. Dr. Salik's answer to Dr. Hafeez's question was probably diplomatic on CTBT. I think Pakistan will have no other option. If India tests, Pakistan will most certainly go for testing. Because Pakistan's position is mostly linked with India. It's not what others do or not. My question to Dr. Elena is that with CTBT ratification and new START ending in 2026, so there wouldn't be any arms control arrangement between United States and Russia at the global level. So how do you see global arms control efforts post-2026? And a brief question to Dr. Petr. What's the Russian perceptions of, or the view on hypersonic weapons or submersible drones? Will it be integrated with nuclear weapons or not? Thank you.
So one last, yes.
Yes, sir, thank you. This is Zaim Hassan Mahmood from CIS, Karachi, research officer over there. My question pertains to the sea-based component of the nuclear triad. And my question is, what mechanisms are there globally for nuclear risk management or perhaps unintentional accidents at sea, both in times of conflict as well as peace? And are there any Russian best practices in this regard relating to the command, control, and communication at sea? Thank you.
I think the last question is very technical, so I would request in the order of, I think, the sequence as we are sitting. Elena, would you start responding to the questions? You can, I think, respond in one go, all whatever is relevant.
Thanks. I would tackle the question about what could be the future of arms control. It is actually not absolutely correct that there is nothing left if the new START treaty expires in 2026. There is some minor agreements in this field between Russia and the US, for example, and all of them are back from the Cold War, but they do still exist. For example, from the end of the 80s, there is a bilateral ballistic launch notification agreement. There is also an agreement on the notification about major strategic exercises. And there is also something from the 70s, an agreement that has celebrated its 50th anniversary just June. It's about the prevention of nuclear war. It's quite an exhaustive agreement in terms of it, for example, provides for bilateral consultations between Moscow and Washington in times of crises. It says that they should not be going into rhetorics about nuclear war against each other and not to go into escalatory steps. So there is something. It's not, of course, comparable to the New START agreement if there is nothing left. Indeed, you're absolutely right. There will be kind of a vacuum after if nothing comes into it. And this is why, this is what I meant was maybe some kind of a looser architecture that might be existing afterwards. For example, right now, Russia has suspended its participation in the New START treaty, but it has said that it will keep to the limits of the treaty, to the ceilings of the treaty, and also inform the US about ballistic launches under those agreements. So maybe under good circumstances, we will see that even if this treaty expires and there is no framework to subsidize it in any way, that maybe we will have unilateral limitations on both sides to, for example, for a while keep the ceilings of this treaty. And other unilateral agreements or politically binding steps, not legally binding, because just as Dr. Salik said, the situation in the Senate is very, very difficult to ratify anything. So we will see what comes.
Thanks. Raza, your question about dispersal. You see, what one of the cardinal principles of deterrence is the second strike capability. And how do you achieve second strike capability? One way is to disperse your weapons, not put all the eggs in one basket at one place. Second is to put some of the weapons in silos. But silos, the problem is that they can be identified and they can be targeted. Because they are static at one place, they can be picked up through satellites, and they can be targeted. It depends on the accuracy of the weapon system. Do you have such accurate weapons that they can directly target a silo? The third method is to put something on the submarines, which gives you what we are used to say, that it gives us assured second strike capability. But even that is now changing. With the unmanned underwater platforms, the risk to the submarines, nuclear submarines, has also increased, because these submersible unmanned vehicles can not only detect the submarines, but can also attack and destroy them. That is one problem. The other is the surveillance, submarine surveillance technologies are advancing in a way that people are already talking about transparent oceans, that anything under the ocean, under the water, will also be as visible as it is on the surface. So how long this assured second strike capability in the form of submarines will last, we can't say. Coming back to the land-based systems, one is dispersal at different size, other is to have some of the weapon system on mobile platforms. And in our case, all our missiles are on mobile platforms. So they can be moved around, and as we know from 1991 Gulf War, the Americans throughout the war, despite total air superiority, could not hit a single Iraqi launcher, Scud launcher, because they were mobile. They would fire and move away. Even if 1 kilometer or 2 kilometer away, they won't be hit. So that is the situation, and I think BrahMos was one-off incident. It's not that easy to carry out a first strike because Pakistan has credible second strike capability, which Indians also know. So if they do this kind of mischief again, they will get the answer. Last time, I think we were, as people say around the world, that Pakistan behaved very maturely and very sensibly and gave us a pat on the back that you are good boys, but will not be waiting next time to get that good boy certificate or that golden star which these students get. We will respond in appropriate manner. So I don't think so it will, the Indians will take such a chance again. But if they cannot control their weapons, as they themselves claim that it was accidentally launched, that is a very poor reflection on their command and control and their safety and security protocols. So let's hope that no such thing happens. And your question about undersea incidents, how to avoid them, there is an agreement between US and Russia on incidents at sea. And it was proposed in the 1999 Lahore MOU between India and Pakistan that the two countries will negotiate an incidents at sea agreement to avoid any accidental situation where two naval vessels, whether on surface or underground, could collide with each other and create a situation which would become very difficult to manage. But unfortunately, despite a few preliminary meetings between the naval experts of both sides, that agreement has not been finalized. So you cannot rule out, it's a very busy waterway, the Arabian Sea, and not only the military vehicles, this naval military vehicles, but also the lot of commercial traffic. 80% of the energy supplies pass through this area. So in this busy and narrow sea body, the possibility of any accidental clash cannot be ruled out. So one has to be careful. Unfortunately, India took the conflict with Pakistan into the third dimension to sea and nuclearizing the Indian Ocean. Obviously, Pakistan had to then respond to it. And now, as I said, the Australian submarines, once they get those under AUKUS, they will also come up to the Indian Ocean. The Chinese are patrolling already. The Americans keep patrolling these seas. So it will be a very tough environment where such kind of accidents cannot be ruled out. So everybody has to then agree to some kind of a framework where these things could be avoided.
Thank you. To the first question about India and China, I agree with you, Mr. Chairman, when you mentioned at the beginning that the best way to prevent nuclear risks is to prevent a conventional war. And this is exactly the Russian response to the challenge related to India's and China's disagreements. Because the Russian, I would recommend you to follow the last Russian concept of foreign policy with a focus on Eurasian politics. Because in response to the security challenges, Russia suggests to have one space with straight links with integration and so on and so forth. And having instruments in this space, these instruments may help to improve confidence and trust between member states, including what exactly happened after the last escalation between China and India, when ministers of defense met in Moscow and started de-escalation between them. To the question on the hypersonic and drones, before we learned about these new systems, Russia almost completed the modernization of its nuclear arsenal.
There, it kind of led to this whole concept of Russia having this approach of escalate to de-escalating, being ready in times of crisis, and the situation where Russia would be, for example, losing a battle somewhere in Europe, it would be ready to engage nuclear weapons to have the situation, the conflict end on its conditions and force the other side to stop fighting. Now, at least from the official statements from the Russian military of defense, from the Russian nuclear doctrine, this is not visible at all. They're saying we do not have this doctrine and it's not in the official documents. And on the other side, Russian officials and Russian experts, they are saying that it's the US that has this approach, that is actually putting this in practice with lowering they say lowering the threshold for nuclear use by injecting lower yield missiles into the theater and showing kind of being ready to use them in need. So Russia thinks that it's actually the US that has this approach, while the US and some other experts saying that Russia has it.
Salik, sir, you would like to say something?
Dr. Elena just mentioned about the low-yield weapons which the Americans have introduced. It's very interesting that they have this Trident II, which carries multiple warheads, each of which can be 400 to 450 kilotons of yield. And in the same carrier, they have now modified and introduced a 5 kiloton warhead. This is going to create a lot of confusion because one, that this missile, once it is launched, the other side can only see this missile, recognizes the Trident missile has been launched. They have no means of knowing whether it is carrying high yield multiple warheads or a low yield 5 kiloton warhead. Secondly, this gives Americans a lot of advantages because the range of this missile is 7,000 kilometers. So while being at open sea, it can fire at any target in Russia or in Europe without having to ask the political clearance from the European countries, because to use those weapons which are based on the European soil, to use any such missile, they have to seek the political permission from the respective countries. In this case, since it will be fired from the submarine, no such formality will be required. Thirdly, it is a quick response because even if they have lowered the readiness level of their arsenals since the end of the Cold War, nuclear weapon systems are always on high alert and they are always mated because there is no geographical distance between the warheads and the delivery systems. Thirdly, these weapons will be very useful for the Americans to intervene in the regional situations. If, for instance, if they have to attack some target in Iran, this 5 kiloton weapon, they will be less inhibited to use that because of the feeling that it will have a limited radius of destruction and limited collateral damage, so they'll be more willing to use this against Iran, North Korea, or such countries.
Thank you, sir.
So that is the danger.
Peter.
Thank you. To the question about the Russian attitude towards the concept of Indo-Pacific, in principle, we have different opinions about this particular subject and quite active debates about that. So we have voices against that. There are voices not supporting, but saying that, well, this is concept not only by the United States, but also by India. But the main issue that Russia raises is about that Russia against militarization or against creation something like Asian NATO. This term was used in official statements. So, the concern, for instance, is related to the AUKUS agreement that we already discussed today, So that is why it's not about the concept, it's about what behind is. As for the dialogue, and it's a very important connection to our yesterday discussion, the key question is to have new generation of professionals educated for being prepared for a dialogue in terms of their knowledge and in terms of practices. So that is why we already yesterday discussed the opportunities to cooperation between our institutions and your institutions in raising students, in exchanging our specialist experts. And I see this a big opportunity. Not only, this is a very important thing, it's not about just only between the United States and Russia. Now we live, and what just yesterday we discussed, is a world, multipolar world. And it doesn't mean that the US and Russia hijacked the arms control design agenda. No, it's not our agenda, it's a world agenda. That is why this dialogue should be developed multilaterally, and the link between Russia and Pakistan is very important. I will stop here because my colleagues discussed escalate to discrete concept in detail. Thank you so much. Chair.
Thank you. I really thank the audience for a very engaging question answer session. And I just mentioned earlier, this subject is so vast that even if one complete day is devoted to this subject, we can still carry on our discussions. Let me reiterate at the end of this session that nobody is interested in fighting a nuclear war because nobody can win a nuclear war. And then where Russia and Pakistan both agree that if you want to avoid nuclear wars, you need to stop all kinds of wars. There should be no use of force. If you are interested in enforcing no first use of no NFUs, then we are suggesting there should be no use of force at all. So given that kind of policy position, our position on nuclear risks has been very stringent policies have been adopted. And in the presence of our Foreign Secretary, I need to once again highlight that Pakistan nuclear security regime, which has recently been, a document has been released. So for the interest of the audience, if you could go through that, so that substantiate my claim that if the nuclear deterrence, as my friend was telling me, of North Korea is the most credible one, so on this globe, I think the most secure and safe nuclear arsenal is that of Pakistan. So that has been accepted internationally, and there is an evidence to that. So with this, I come to the end of this session, and I think I once again thank the eminent panel and also the audience for being with us and bearing with us with this very dry subject. So thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
I would request Dr. Naeem Salik to please present the souvenirs to our respected guests. First, I would request Dr. Elena to please receive the souvenir from Dr. Salik. Thank you, ma'am. Now I would request Dr. Petr to please come forward. Dr. Petr. I would also request Ms. Daria to please come on the stage to receive her souvenir. Ms. Daria Sprinskaya, Deputy Executive Director, Gorchakov Fund. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now hear the closing remarks from executives of the collaborating think tanks. I would request the speakers to please be brief and sum up the discussion as soon as possible. I would request Ms. Daria Sprinskaya, Deputy Executive Director, Gorchakov Public Diplomacy Fund, for her concluding remarks. Ma'am.
that would be brief, but still with a lot of compliments. So, dear colleagues, today our program has officially come to its end. There were many vital speeches and important discussions. I think that the thing that remained unconditional was the warm welcome from the Pakistani side, your hospitality and assistance on any issue. Hopefully, new conclusions that each of us came to during this conference will be the fundamental for our future cooperation. I would like to, first of all, congratulate my Pakistani colleagues with this event. It was marvelous. And also, I want to highlight that we see that today, Pakistan sent its application to participate in BRICS. And in 2024, Russia will host this organization, will be a chairman. And I think this is a very promising coincidence for us. And as an official result, I would like to highlight the following. First, we are waiting for our colleagues from SVI in Moscow the next year, April. And I hope we will complete the official procedure of signing the memorandum. And second, we would like to assure all the Pakistani colleagues that our programs in Gorchakov funds and within all Russia's official institutions are open and available, and especially different internships and research programs, educational one, expert mobility. Please do not hesitate to contact us and follow the English version of the fund website. We have different possibilities. And the third one is that I hope that together with SVI, we can develop a bilateral annual program on security issues that can include both very important experts and as well young one. The program can cover all the security matters, cyber tech, food and so on, and especially non-proliferation process. And this will be very prominent for us. And again, many thanks to every member of organizing committee and to all of the experts and participants. I believe that these people who actually participated in this event feel that there is a contact between people to people, and we see the very nice results of it. And in the conclusion, I would like to especially highlight the role and the excellent knowledge and professionalism of Mr. Salik. And to tell the truth, he, in his own hand, showed us the history of Pakistan, the culture, and especially thanks to Mr. Hamdan, who helped us in every issue. That's all. Thank you very much for your attention, and thank you all for this memorable event.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I would request Mr. Anton Klopkov, Director, Center for Energy and Security Studies, Russia, to share his views about the conference. Sir.
A lot has already been said, so I will try to be brief. First of all, many thanks to our friends and colleagues in Pakistan, Dr. Salik. As I mentioned in my introductory remarks, we know each other for more than 10 years. Every time I'm surprised what a reliable partner you are and the institutions which you represent. I hope that this event will become a new stage in cooperation between Russian and Pakistani think tanks. I would like to thank SVI, Gorchakov Fund for organizing this event. It was a great pleasure for us at the Center for Energy and Security Studies to contribute. I would like to thank a colleague of mine, Ekaterina Poryadina, who was coordinating preparation of this meeting from our side. And as already Daria mentioned, we are looking forward to welcome and host Pakistani experts and, of course, SVI colleagues in Moscow next April, when, among other things, the next Moscow Non-Proliferation Conference will take place, and I'm glad to see many colleagues in this room who participated in the conference in the past. And again, as Daria mentioned, I think it is critically important to introduce young specialists, young scholars to the work which all of us are doing. So I hope that as part of the Moscow Non-Proliferation Conference, as well as other projects and programs which we implement in Moscow, there would be enough space for scholars who just started their professional career, and in our case, who are interested in different sides of application of nuclear. It's peaceful use, it's non-proliferation, it's arms control, because this is the focus of our institution. So at the very end, I would like to thank again Dr. Salik, you, and of course, Mr. Hamdan Khan, who was so kind to escort and accompany us on every step we made on Pakistani soil during that trip. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Now last but definitely not the least, because he's my boss, I would request Dr. Naeem Ahmed Salik to come to the podium to share his final thoughts about the conference. Sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank again all the participants who found time to make this event a success, and especially our Russian guests who came all the way from Russia to spend these 3 days with us. I would also like to acknowledge our chief guest for the closing session, Dr. General Zubair Mahmood Hayat, who has been very kind to accommodate our request and to give his closing remarks. Just a few words about these 3 days of interactions. Within this short time, we were able to show a glimpse of Pakistani culture and history to our Russian guests. And then over the last 2 days, we have had a very fruitful and healthy discussion where we have tried to exchange views and understand each other's perspectives. And we found that there's a lot of confluence between the ideas of the two sides. There's not much of difference of opinion, particularly on the global issues which both of us are faced with. So we try to cover a wide canvas through these discussions, and we had a very good debate. We changed the format into this panel so that there could be greater amount of discussion, but you can always do this much in the given time, because I am sure there are a lot of participants who did not get a chance to ask questions here, and mostly those who participated online, many of them did not get a chance to get answers to their questions, but I'm sure whatever was discussed and debated here, they would have found it of some use, and they will, I think some of the answers, the questions would have been answered deliberately or just by chance. Once again, I would like to thank the Russian participants. It's the first time that we have had such a wide array of experts and academicians, scholars from Russia. The two organizations are mentioned here, Gorchakov Fund and Center for Energy and Security Studies, but there are many other prominent think tanks and universities which are represented here. For instance, the Waldai Discussion Club, the Institute of Oriental Studies, the Moscow State University, the St. Petersburg University. So we were lucky to have experts from all these very eminent organizations and institutions. And we believe that such kind of interaction between the scholars belonging to the two countries would continue to develop better understanding of each other's perspectives and further give a boost to our improving relationships. We are trying to institutionalize our relation because it has happened in the past that there are one-off efforts where there's one or two events and then you lose track of it. But what we are trying to do is now to have institutionalized relationship and arrangement with our Russian counterparts by signing the MOUs with them and continuing our interaction online and in person around the year. With this, I'll come to the end of my
Ladies and gentlemen, we are joined by our chief guest, General Zubair Mahmood Hayat, Nishan Imtiaz military retired. General Zubair Mahmood Hayat joined Pakistan Army in 1976 and had a decorated military career that spanned over 4 decades. He is a graduate of Fort Sill, Oklahoma, USA, Command and Staff College, Camberley, UK, and National Defense University, Islamabad. He has 2 master's degrees in war studies and military science. He has delivered lectures on peace, security, and defense in foreign military institutions and think tanks across 6 continents. During his service, the general has commanded an infantry division and corps. He was Director General Strategic Plans Division and Chief of General Staff, Pakistan Army. In recognition of his meritorious services, he has been decorated with Nishan-e-Imtiaz Military and Hilal-e-Imtiaz Military. He is also a recipient of the Legion of Merit of Turkish Armed Forces, King Abdulaziz Medal of Excellence by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and Defense Commendation Medal Italy. He has been a member of the National Security Committee and also the Deputy Chairman of the National Command Authority. In November 2016, the General took over as the 16th Chairman Joint Chiefs of Staff Committee. He is also the 3rd Colonel-in-Chief of the Regiment of Artillery. In November 2019, he hung his uniform after 43 years of military service. The General continues to give lectures on geostrategy, nuclear security, and issues pertaining to defense and security. I would request General Zubair Mahmood Hayat to the podium for his address. Thank you, sir.
A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Being the last speaker is always probably the most difficult part of the game. But one thing good about being the last speaker is you don't have a time pressure. There's nobody coming after you to deliver a lecture. I wish to start by thanking SVI for inviting me and complimenting SVI and all associates who organized and participated in this 2 days international conference. I was glad to hear that our Russian friends had some taste of the hospitality, culture, and cuisine of Pakistan. But I hope that this will be the first of many in future times to come. So what was this conference all about? There's a saying that says, if a man knows not which port to sail, no wind is favorable. So this exercise probably was an exploration to ports and to see whether winds are favorable and in which direction. But before I make my concluding remarks, I'd like to flag a disclaimer. I'm a retired person, and therefore the views that I express are purely my personal views. It's important to establish the context between Pakistan and Russia. This relationship is not against any state. It is not against any alliance. It is not against any partners. It is basically a quest for a just world, a more fairer world, a more equitable world. It is therefore a quest for a common good and for the prosperity of both our nations and both our people. I must admit that I am a product of Cold War. But then even in my life I saw in 1966 the Tashkent Accord after the 1965 war being brokered between India and Pakistan with Russian help. I saw 1973 the steel mill in Karachi being inaugurated by Mr. Bhutto with Russian help. On the military side, in my early days in career, I had seen 130 millimeter Russian guns and Gauss jeeps. I think something to which General Kidwai had also alluded yesterday during my service. So Russia was not ever alien to Pakistan, although may not have been very warm to Pakistan at certain periods of history. But my first real exposure to Russia came in 2008 and 9, when for the first time a Pakistan Army chief, General Kiani, visited Russia. And I was a part of that delegation. And I think it was a great privilege because I saw for first hand the warmth and the professionalism of the Russian people and their institutions. When I was the Chief of General Staff in 2015, a Russian general came to meet me in my office at the GHQ. While we both sat and had a cup of tea, I always kept thinking at that time that if 40 years ago somebody had told me that I would be sitting in an office in Pakistan Army and having a cup of tea with a Russian general, he would have told me I was out of my mind. That was not the case. The world was changing at that time. The world has changed now. And therefore it was no coincidence that when I was the chairman between 2016 and 19, I not only visited Russia once, I visited Russia twice and had the great pleasure of meeting General Gerasimov, a man of great professional character and competence whom I respect as a soldier. Talking about the transforming global order of which you have spoken enough in the last 2 days, I have only 2 major takeaways. One, we know there is a great power competition since 2017 in earnest. My takeaway is that it is increasingly becoming an aggressive great power competition. 2, my takeaway from the global environment is that there is now a decisive shift. It is not only a tangible shift, it is a decisive shift from unipolarity to multipolarity. And therefore, we in Pakistan, we have noted President Putin, who in a speech last year in September said that the aggressive policy of some Western elites is aimed at preserving their domination, therefore trying to block and suppress any sovereign and independent development centers, so as to continue flagrantly forcing their will and pseudo-values on other countries and nations, unquote. Now, towards the end, let me summarize some facts which every Pakistani knows and wishes to capitalize. Russia is a member of P5. is the largest landmass country in the world. 11% of global landmass belongs to Russia. Is the largest nuclear weapon arsenal in the world. Is one of the global leaders in food security, especially wheat. It is rich in oil and gas. And it is unfortunate for Europe that it has just lost one of its main pipelines that was to provide energy security to Europe itself. And the question remains, who did it? It is rich in minerals, and therefore, in short, Russia is a major stakeholder in global. Now, this is not lost to the other major power. For example, the chairman of the United States Chief of Staff Committee, General Mark Milley, during a speech at the National Defense University, he said there are now at least 3 superpowers. And then he goes on to name the 3. According to General Milley, those 3 superpowers are United States, and interestingly, he places Russia at number 2 and places China at number 3. I don't know whether he wanted that sequence to be like that or whether in method of speaking he constructed his sentence like that. So therefore, it is very normal for a country like Pakistan, which has a population of 250 million people, the 5th most populous nation in the world, a nuclear power in itself, geostrategically located, to have good relations. Now, in order to do it, you require common ground. And I think there's enough common ground that can be explored very quickly and very substantively. You have common grounds in terms of energy, oil, gas, and civil nuclear energy, something I know you have spoken about in the last few days. There is common ground in food security. There is common ground in military to military. And as I said, we have been embarking upon that route for the last 15 years from that visit of General Kiani that I spoke about. There is common ground in people-to-people contact between Russia and Pakistan. There has to be a common ground in conflict resolution. And for us, the greatest conflict resolution requirement is that of Kashmir. We have to find a common ground on that account. There has to be a common ground, and there is a common ground in conflict risks management, and may I further stretch it to nuclear risk management. There is common ground in technology, because as technological denial is increasing in the West, probably the global South and those of us in the East can do more in cooperating with regard to technology. There is common ground in education. Russian education system, including their medical education system, their engineering education system, is one of the best in the world. There is common ground in counter-terrorism. There is common ground in the political domain, whether it is BRICS, whether it is SCO, there is common ground. There is common ground in regional alignments, whether it is in Afghanistan, Iran, or Central Asian Republic. And a new common ground which has emerged in the last 2 years is a common stand against Islamophobia. We are very delighted that Russian state has taken a clear stance on Islamophobia. And this is something that we in Pakistan deeply appreciate. But while we explore these common grounds, I, as a student of humanity, believe that while we explore this common ground in the substantive fields that I have spoken about, we must also explore common ground in soft power. We require poets. I know English poets. I probably also know some French poets. I also know probably an American poet. But I ought to know some Russian poets also. We ought to know in soft power writers, artists, students, bloggers, storytellers. This is essential. This is essential because of the decades of stereotyping that was done by Hollywood movies of painting Russia red. If that needs to be broken, and it needs to be broken, then we require these soft elements to come into play. And in this domain, the most vital part is the media. For a good part of my life, the only media, foreign media that we were looking at was BBC. Then came CNN. So if 10 years ago you had gone to an office, more likely you would have seen BBC or CNN on the television screen. No longer today. Probably you will see a local channel because obviously they have occupied some space. But increasingly you will find Russian television, RT, taking place, some of the television screens inside Pakistan. Now this per se has to be good. I'm not saying what RT is saying is right. Maybe at some time what BBC is saying is right. But then I must have the choice to see BBC, and I must have the choice to see RT and to see both sides of the picture and then make a determination and not be bombarded by one side of the picture and make a unilateral opinion. So probably we require more in this information, media, and perception domain. As Pakistan and Russia moves forward, you'll have to scratch but also jump new frontiers. Frontiers such as cyber, frontiers such as space, frontiers such as artificial intelligence, because that is where the new world order is emerging, and that is where probably you require strategic understanding and probably strategic alignment. As a practitioner, I have always seen that there are two core elements to any relationship, and Russia-Pakistan relationship will be no different. And those two core elements are, first is understanding. You have to develop a common understanding to issues that confront bilaterally or multilaterally. So the first issue is understanding. But even beyond understanding, the more important part is trust. You have to develop trust. Now on trust, I can tell you I met an American officer somewhere in Europe, and he happened to be a part of a contingent in Somalia where an American Apache helicopter had gone down. And you have seen a Hollywood movie on that account probably. Now to rescue those American soldiers, there was a Pakistani contingent in Somalia which went and rescued those American soldiers. And this gentleman with whom I had lunch in that western capital, he told me, he said, and then I was a colonel, he said, Colonel Hayat, you know how much of trust I have in Pakistan? I said, no. He said, if ever my life was in danger, if ever, again my life was in danger, and I had to pick up one nation to choose which will cover my back, I will choose Pakistan. This is what is trust. And trust is earned. And I can assure the Russians, we are there standing 2 steps forward to ensure that we develop this trust. Because once we develop this trust, then we will be able to identify domains, and in those domains, we will be able to identify our framework. But in order to do that, there is another essential element. Change the prism, I mean, when Russia looks at Pakistan, it must not look at Pakistan from the prism of Washington or New Delhi. Russia must look at Pakistan from the prism of Moscow. Similarly, if Pakistan has to look towards Russia, it must not look at Russia through any other prism but the prism of Islamabad, looking at the prism of Russia. So as we move forward, our core requirement has to be, as I said, to develop an understanding. And I have laid out 3 fields of trying to develop that understanding. A, develop a common understanding on the emerging order. B, develop an understanding on new normals as are being established. And C, develop common understanding on new postures that are being adopted. You have to close this triangle to be able to develop the big strategic picture with which you want to move forward. And for developing this common understanding, you need to develop a common eye which will be able to clearly see evolution in following 4 fields. Have a common eye which will be able to see evolution in the new political architecture that is shaping up. Develop a common eye to see new economic architecture which is shaping up. Also the new security architecture, both globally and regionally, which is shaping up. And may I also add, try and see a new intelligence architecture that might or should take place. After all, you have examples like Five Eyes and others, which are actually, existing examples of intelligence architectures. Ladies and gentlemen, I would be amiss if I do not lay out what I think are Pakistan's expectations from Russia. The foremost has to be that we believe and we hope that Russia will be sensitive to the balance of power in South Asia. Whether that balance of power is in the political domain, in the military domain, or in the strategic domain. Russia will be very sensitive to that very thinly held balance of power. 2, it is our natural expectation that Russia will commit and stand by to Pakistan's independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. It is also our natural expectation that Russia will position itself as neutral or possibly as a positive arbitrator in dispute resolution, especially Kashmir. Russia's position on Kashmir will be a significant indicator to Pakistan as we move forward. And last but not the least, it would be an expectation from Pakistan that Pakistan is embraced by Russia as a nuclear weapon state. So to conclude, as a military man, as a gunner who fire gun, my always last thing has been to pull the lanyard or to press a button so that there is a bang and you start off with the firepower that you wish to do. So how do you kickstart this relationship to a higher level? And I came up with one idea, and that's my personal idea. You see, Russia and India jointly produced a missile. It was called BrahMos. It's from Brahmaputra River in India and Moscow River in Moscow. BrahMos. May I leave a food for thought to jointly develop a hypersonic missile called Indomos from the Indus River in Pakistan and Moscow River in Moscow. That would be the bang that will probably herald a new era. So the way forward: bury the past, gain the momentum, and upscale government to government, military to military, and people to people contexts. Once again, thank you. Happy to see the Russian friends here. Hope they will come again. Happy to see the consolidation being done by SVI, and wish you Godspeed in your future endeavors. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I would request the chief guest team of SVI and our worthy guest speakers to assemble in front of stage for a group photo.